All right, so we're going to continue with Peak. Last chapter was really long, but it was all necessary information um, because he's worried. He's worried if he's not going to make it. He's worried if he's going to, end up getting sick. And for some reason, he's going to end up coming back down instead. Obviously, he wants to climb Mount Everest for his own, his own want. Um, and on top of that, everything that's riding on it for Josh, I'm sure part of that has to, comes into play because that is his dad, even though his dad hasn't really even shown up. I don't know if you guys noticed in that chapter as well. Sanjo talks about his dad, and what does he say? His dad is dead, right? And he's getting to know his dad through the people that he's meeting there. He's getting to know his dad um, on the mountain. Whereas Pete, who has his dad that's alive, he's not getting to know his dad. And actually, you know what? If he is getting to know his dad, he's getting to know certain things, certain qualities of his dad that stink. And so it's kind of messed up that it seems like Sanjo's getting closer to his dad, who was dead, versus Pete, who has his dad alive. And it, Josh is so distant. I mean, he calls him Josh. He doesn't call him dad, right? Um, so he's worried about being sick. Uh, Clearly, at some point, he's comparing himself to Holly. Holly is like this girly girl, pink tent, clothes that's probably pink too, and you know isn't trained to climb, nor does she really have the desire to climb Mount Everest for her own will. She's more so doing it because she wants the story and the glory of it, right? Um, so she's doing well. She can even she's able to uh, make sentences without gasping, and she's not sick. And even Sanjo's starting to get sick now. So we'll see what else happens in this chapter, Letters from Home. Let's go over a couple of words. Cocooned. So basically, cocoon means like he's wrapped up, or whomever the character will be wrapped up, feeling comfort. Some of you probably have cocooned next to your parents when you want your snuggles. Don't lie. I know some of you've done that. Grab your little blanket, covered yourself up, and just curled up next to your parent. You've cocooned next to your parents. Wrestling. Basically, he's willing to round up and steal. Probably not any of these animals, but maybe a yak. And then they'll refer to King Kong climbing the Empire State Building. And obviously, who's like King Kong? Well, Peak is, right? He climbed the Woolworth Mountain. Oh, sorry, Woolworth Building. And right now he's climbing the mountain, even though no one knows yet, right? But yeah, just wanted to show you the imagery of what that is referring to when we come across King Kong climbing the Empire State Building. All right, let's go ahead and continue with Peak. Letters from Home. That night back in base camp, I slept for 15 hours. When I finally woke up, I felt as good as I had ever felt in my entire life. I could have easily gone out for an 18,044-foot jog, but instead I walked to the mess tent and ate about 9 pounds of food. Dr. Krieger came in and watched me wolf down my last plate, then took me over to the aid tent to look at my throat. She said it was better, but I needed to keep taking the antibiotics for the next week to make sure it went away. My next stop was HQ, where they congratulated me on making it to ABC and gave me a packet of letters from home. There was a card from Rolf, 2 letters from Mom, and 5 thick letters from Paula and Patrice. The envelopes were crumpled and smeared with dirt and grease. I looked at the postmarks. The mail had been sent to Josh's office in Chiang Mai, forwarded to Kathmandu, and from there, no doubt, thrown into a truck headed to the mountain. Thin air mail. Getting the letters caused my good mood to tank. I hadn't spent 1 minute thinking about my family since I'd arrived at base camp, and I felt a little guilty. But what really bothered me was that the letters had arrived at base camp in the first place. This meant that some of those letters I had sent to my father when I was a kid probably had arrived too. He had gone into a tent at some high altitude camp just like this and come out with a stack of letters, which included a letter from his son. I was so mad I wanted to run up to ABC and punch him in the goggles. Instead, I decided to finish Moleskin #1, which you are reading, and send it to my mom. Kind of like a long letter. I was not going to ignore my family the same way that Josh had ignored me. And it would fulfill my requirement for Vincent at GSS. The next morning, I went to the mess tent to get something to eat before getting back to the Moleskin. Sanjo wasn't there. Boy very sick, the cook told me. I took a thermos of hot tea over to Sanjo's tent. He was cocooned in his sleeping bag like a caterpillar larva, with only his stocking-caped head sticking out. You shouldn't be here, he croaked, but I could tell he was happy to see me. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, and maybe it was the dim light coming through the blue nylon tent, but he looked like he had lost 10 pounds since I last saw him. I poured him a cup of tea. You shouldn't be here, he repeated. Forget it, I said. You and I have been swapping germs for weeks. I'm immune. I put the cup to his lips, hoping I was right. I will be better in a few days. Looking at him, that was hard to believe, but I said I was sure he was right. I stopped by the aid tent. I wasn't sure if Dr. Krieger's duties included treating kitchen help, but if they didn't, I was going to talk her into it. She was tapping away on her laptop, but stopped when I came in. How are you feeling today? Fine, but I'm worried about Sanjo. She made me open my mouth and shone a light down my throat. Inflammation is almost gone, she said, clicking off the light. But you need to keep taking those antibiotics, especially if you insist on visiting sick people in their tents. So you've seen him? I said, last night and this morning. And he's sick, but he'll live. I spent the next 2 days writing and managed to finish the first Moleskin on the day Josh was to return from ABC in Camp 4. When I got to the end of the notebook, I wrote letters to Paula and Patrice, thanking them for the artwork they had sent and telling them how I had pinned it up in my tent, so it was the first thing I saw in the morning and the last thing I saw at night. I told them that I missed them so bad. I was thinking about rustling a yak and riding it back to New York. Last, I wrote to Ralph. He had sent me a card with a photo of King Kong clinging to the Empire State Building. Inside were $300 bills and a handwritten note. Hang in there, Peek. I miss you. I want you home. Love, Ralph. Not we. I miss you. I want you home. With these 2 sentences, he had done more for me than Josh had ever done or could ever do. I went over to HQ and addressed the envelopes. Sparky told me the mail would go out the following morning. When Josh arrived late that afternoon, I didn't tell him about the Moleskin or the letters. He didn't deserve to know. Wow, guys, it kind of stinks for him, right? Like, you have to think about it from a 14-year-old point of view. He's in this mountain with his dad. Well, not really with his dad, but there with his dad, right? And he gets these letters from his family that are clearly being forwarded from where he's supposed to be, but he's not at. And he's like in awe that he got the letters, because that basically showed him that every letter he sent Josh when he was little, Josh was receiving. And so that kind of stinks that Josh never took the time to respond to Peek. So Peek is heartbroken. And now he's looking at the letter that his stepdad wrote and how his stepdad, with just 2 sentences, made him or showed him how much he truly loves him. That's huge. That's huge to consider. Think about the conflict that Peak is having with himself and what the conflicts that he's having with the thoughts of his dad. Um, it's a lot for someone his age to go through in the situation that he's in. All right, guys, go ahead and fill out your Google Forms.